I'll start off and kick it off. My name is Erica Thomas, and I'm here with the League of Women Voters. And I'm wanting to welcome everybody on behalf of both the League and the Citizens for a Better City, sorry. And want to make sure everybody realizes that we are recording the event. So please be aware. And the good news is that means that you can listen to it later if you if you missed anything or if you know of anybody else who missed it. So please pass that along. So now onto the event itself. In the run up to Earth Day 2022, we have designed this event to focus on the environment in the city of Falls Church. And to that end, we're very much looking forward to first hearing from Environment Programs Coordinator for the City of Falls Church, Kate Walker. And following Kate's presentation, we will hear a few words of commentary from the Vice Chair of the City Planning Commission, Tim Stevens. And following Tim's commentary, Tim will take Q&A from the audience. So before turning it to our two guest speakers, however, it's my honor to first turn it over to President of the Citizens for a Better City, who's putting this event together with the League, Hal Lipman, to provide some general context about what we hope to accomplish.
Okay, Erica, I've amended my opening statement. It's going to last for 3 hours and 10 minutes. Is that okay?
Oh, okay, great.
Hi, everybody, and welcome. I just want to welcome those, a special welcome. There are more than a few, who just participated in the memorial tree dedication in honor of former city council member and unparalleled environmental advocate, Dan Z. It was striking to me how appropriate it is to be having this event immediately following that dedication. As Erica indicated, the discussion this evening is taking place in the run-up to this year's annual Earth Day observance on April 22nd, that's Friday. By way of introduction, the first Earth Day took place in 1970. I don't know how many people remember that, but I will add that our own Tim Stevens participated in that, marching as a freshman at Eastern Illinois University, which was, his event was one of tens of thousands that took place that day across our country. So for younger folks, that's 50-something years ago. Good grief. Since then, annual Earth Day observances have grown to include events and activities in more than 190 nations, involving hundreds of millions of individuals. Broadly speaking, Earth Day observances have sought to accomplish two things. First, to unite people from around the world in support of environmental causes, and second, to enlist these supporters in ongoing efforts to address the serious issues our planet faces, such as air and water pollution, depletion of natural resources, and now, with an ever-increasing sense of urgency, climate change. In keeping with this thumbnail sketch of the annual observance of Earth Day, the League of Women Voters of Falls Church and Citizens for a Better City thought it might be helpful to jointly sponsor an event for this year's cycle. Today's discussion, Environment for Everyone, an Earth Day update, is the result of this effort. Its purpose, quite simply, is to narrow what's happening environmentally at the global, national, and regional levels to focus on what's happening right here in Falls Church, and inform residents about how they can weigh in on local environmental issues and problems and contribute to environmental action in their own community. That's my introductory 2 cents, Erica. Back to you.
Yep, she's on. I think she's on mute.
You're muted, Erica.
All right, let's try that again so that you might be able to hear me. Sorry about that. So thank you, Al. I think that was great context to kick off, turn it over to our keynote speaker, and then followed by Tim Stevens. So I want to give you a little bit more of an introduction to both of them. So first, we're going to hear, as I mentioned, from Kate Walker. And Kate has been the Environmental Programs Coordinator for the City of Falls Church since November 2015. And has been a resident of the City of Falls Church for more than 15 years. Kate's goal is to help the city achieve its vision for environmental harmony by leveraging our community's long established drive and commitment to protecting and investing in a green and sustainable future. Kate's current primary project is to develop a community energy action plan that will enable us to take full advantage of regional, state, and federal funding and collaborative initiatives for environmental protection and improvement. Kate also serves as a focal point for the city's many environmental programs, ensuring that we work effectively together to protect and nurture a healthy environment. So Kate's presentation today will focus on the need for environmental action in the city in the context of 3 areas of ongoing change: our growing population, commercial and residential redevelopment, and the changing climate. And I'll let her go into the details of that. But I wanted to also give a brief introduction to Tim Stevens, who will provide a brief commentary after Kate speaks. And then, as I mentioned, we'll also run the Q&A section. So Tim Stevens is also a long-term resident of the city who has served, and maybe I think longer than Kate even, and has served as the past chair of the Environmental Sustainability Council and is currently the vice chair of the city's Planning Commission. So when Tim does the Q&A portion of the event, we've asked that you please come up with your questions along the way, write them down, and then put them in the chat, and save them for the Q&A part of the event so that we can have the flow continue through the 2 speakers and then have the questions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kate.
Well, hello, everybody. I see from the participant list that I am largely among friends, which is very reassuring. I will endeavor to share my screen and see what happens. So do you see my introductory slide? Okay, you've already heard I'm the Environmental Programs Coordinator for the City of Falls Church. My name's Kate Walker, been with the city for about 6 years. My presentation tonight, I thought I would build around a major part of the work that I did in that 6 years, working with the Environmental Sustainability Council and community members and other staff. We put together a chapter of the comprehensive plan that addresses environmental sustainability, and we called it Environment for Everyone. It's really important, I think, that community plays a big role in our environment. And so it's great to be presenting to you tonight about how you can play more of a role. The more the merrier. We're always happy to have help. And so my goal is to let you know how you can get involved. And as I talk about the chapter, I'll also talk a bit about what your government is doing and also about policy implications for some of the environmental issues that are going on. So just the context, this is Earth Day, this is our planet, the classic image of the planet. It's the only one we've got. We've been doing some terrible things to it. And if you particularly think about the changing climate, things look pretty bad. If you look at the headlines in other papers, you'll see that there's a lot going on, and the UN's latest climate report has said that we have a brief and rapidly closing window to avoid a hotter, deadly future. So we need to act, and we need to act now. And you might say, well, I can't affect the whole planet. And that's why I'm talking about all of this in the context of the City of Falls Church, because there are things we can do here that will have an impact. One of the things that we need to do as we consider what we can do is to bear in mind that we are ourselves in a changing environment. Some of this change is change we've chosen, and some of it is change that's happening to us. Specifically, the chapter 5 looks at 3 contexts of change. One is our rapidly increasing population. The city's population increased 19% between 2010 and 2020, and it's projected to increase an additional 35% by 2045. So that's quite a lot more people. And from an environmental point of view, it's certainly arguable that the more close together people live, the less their overall impact on the environment. But it's certainly something we need to bear in mind as we think about how we're going to manage things in the city. part of what we're doing in order to manage that growth is redevelopment. And certainly there's some very visible commercial redevelopment. But if you consider what's happening with single family homes, an estimate done by the planning department showed that single family home impacts about twice as much land annually as commercial development. So while we put an enormous amount of emphasis on what we're doing on the commercial development side, the single family home redevelopment is also having a big impact on our environment. And then, of course, this is no hidden elephant in any room. Our climate is changing. Just to talk about what's actually happening in this area, we know that temperatures and water level in the Potomac River have been rising, and they will continue to rise. We're going to have more frequent, less predictable extreme weather events, and that has a big impact on storms, particularly, and therefore storm water, and also potentially a hazardous environment for our tree population. And this graph at the top is quite interesting. The number of days with hot nights is going to increase. And the problem with hot nights is that your home doesn't cool down. So you have to use more air conditioning. So you have to use more energy. So, it adds to itself. It's one of those things that increases itself on and on. So these changes are the things that we're trying to manage as we look at policies. When we were discussing how to structure the chapter, it's really hard to address the environment. It's a big topic. So I said, well, let's do the classics, earth, air, fire, water, spirit. And everybody said, no. So we ended up with this. We have consumption and waste, stormwater, urban forest, climate, energy and air, and community. And that's the order I'm going to address them in today, just because it's a comfortable way of presenting them. So starting with consumption and waste, lots of pictures. I'm just going to talk. Don't worry about it. I decided to start with that because everybody thinks they know where they are. How do I be environmentally friendly when I'm dealing with waste management in my house? And everybody thinks, oh, I'll recycle and I'll make sure I sort my plastics and my metals and my paper, and I'll recycle. But that was how we started. That was actually how the Environmental Sustainability Council started, as a recycling and litter prevention committee. But we really have to change our thinking. We can't be just addressing stuff after we've used it. We have to go right back to the beginning and say, how can we use less? So it's not really about managing waste, it's about managing consumption. And that's why I have a picture of the library. I think this is the pre-renovation children's room. But the library, you can think of, that's the original center of sustainability, where people don't own stuff for themselves. Everybody shares it. They even have, a small quantity of garden tools and things like the thermal cameras, which I'll talk about a little later. Things that we share and we don't own ourselves are the way of reducing our consumption. So share things, borrow things, rent things, take your own carry-out box to a restaurant when you go there. Eat the food that you buy. One of the big problems with food in this country, 40% of the food produced in this country is wasted, never eaten. So just get in the habit of using leftovers, freezing things. These are the personal things we can do. Buy your clothes at thrift stores. Everything I'm wearing tonight came from a thrift store, except maybe my socks. So it's more about reduce what you're using, reuse what you have, and as a last resort, that resort to recycle is absolutely the last thing we want to think about. Always, always, always think, how can I avoid using this? In policy things, the city government is about to start work on its new 20-year solid waste management plan. So I think there'll be a task force set up for that, and we'll need committed citizens who want to participate in that. The government is planning to put together a sustainable procurement policy. Things we're already doing include actually recycling pavement. Some of the machines that resurface our roads actually just recycle the existing pavement and put it back down again. We use an intergovernment auction so that we're not always buying new stuff. But from a policy point of view, the city needs what's called a zero waste plan. Zero waste is a target that you aim for, is not that where you're necessarily going to get, but you want to plan for zero waste. This little yellow, the bag tag, that's a pay-as-you-throw concept where you have to pay to throw things away. Maybe our solid waste management plan should have bigger fees for paying as you throw things away. This photograph is from our recycling extravaganza, which should be called a reuse extravaganza. These bicycles are going to be shipped all over the world to people who need transportation. So basically on consumption, the message is it's reduce, reuse, recycle in that order for a reason. That's what we need to do. So moving on to stormwater, this has been a big topic, of course, in the city because we've had in the last 2 years 2 really big storms that have impacted many properties in the city. And I think we have to acknowledge that that's in part, at least, attributable to the changing climate. You know, these are 100-year storms that are now occurring more frequently and less predictably, and that makes it hard to manage. On a citywide level, one of the things that's really in our favor are our trees. When I look at, I look at a tree and I see a thing of beauty for certain, but what I also see is a water pump. Trees take water out of the ground and pump it up into the air for us. They are pumps that are basically, once you've planted them, they're free, they maintain themselves, they get bigger as the need gets bigger. And they also provide shade and shelter and filtration of pollutants. So trees are an enormously important part of our stormwater plan. And the city has a remarkably high tree canopy for an urban area, but the more we can plant and the more we can save, the better. What the trees aren't handling for us gets drained either into storm drains, pipes underground, or into our streams. These underground pipes, the city's stormwater infrastructure is old and much of it is damaged. It's being relined. So we inject slightly smaller plastic pipe inside the collapsing metal pipe. But it's not, it may not be enough. One of the things that we've done in a couple of cases is to take underground pipes and daylight them. So these are streams that were buried in the 1970s. When everybody thought, well, we just need to build as many houses as we can and get the water out of the way. But the problem with putting the water underground in a pipe is that it gets hot and it carries heat and dirt very rapidly directly to the river. Our stormwater is not filtered before it hits the river and the Chesapeake Bay. It carries everything from our streets with it. When I say it's not filtered, some of it we catch. So some of you may remember behind the community center under the new tennis courts, we put this big stormwater filtration system to take water from the City Hall campus. It captures it, allows it to settle, filters it, and then it enters the storm drain. So it's a bit slower and it's a bit cleaner. But a natural stream or a naturalized stream is a much better way of managing stormwater. We also have some rain gardens in the city, and getting down to what you can personally do is to make your own landscape more water absorbing. One of the things that people tend to believe is that a lawn is a way of handling water, but actually lawns are not much better than a paved area in terms of handling water. What you need is some deeper rooted native grasses or plantings. So the more you can get rid of the lawn that you probably don't use, that you have to maintain with polluting equipment and noisy equipment. My goodness, everybody complains about the noise. But one of my favorite sayings is, this isn't 17th century France. We don't need to have lawns. Most of us maybe use a small patch of lawn for your kids or your dog, and pick up after it, by the way. But, you know, most of us, if we go outside at all, sit on the deck. So the rest of the yard could be trees and plantings. It really doesn't need to be a lawn. The rain barrel here, you can get rain barrels through the Village Preservation and Improvement Society to control your use of rainwater. So, you know, it doesn't always rain when you want it to, but if you have the rain barrel, you can have that rainwater there when you're ready to use it. There's something important here on the policy side, a couple of things. One is stormwater management has been driven for a long time by the need to keep the Chesapeake Bay free of pollution. And that's still very important, but it hasn't focused on local flood mitigation. And it's only now as we see these bigger storms that suddenly everyone's paying a lot more attention to the question of how are we going to mitigate flooding. And so that's something that we need to do in terms of policy. When you're thinking about what do I want to say to my state representative or to the federal government, it's what are you doing about flood mitigation? How are we planning to mitigate flooding? One of the things that's happened in the state is that we had the legislature a couple of years ago joined the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. The current government are trying to stop that, but some of that funding was earmarked for flood mitigation. So if Richmond is successful in blocking our membership of RGGI, we will lose some of the money that we had hoped to have for flood mitigation. So that's a really important issue. So going back to my big water pumps, here they are. The city has the Lands Count, a tree canopy of almost 49%, which is huge for an urban environment. But it's really important to us. Yes, they're big water pumps, and I love them as big water pumps, but they also provide shade and shelter. And as you're walking along Broad Street on a hot sunny day, having the trees there really makes a huge difference to your environment. And in fact, being able to see trees has been shown in scientific studies to be good for your health. So we are happier and healthier because we have trees. I love these too. These are on Lincoln Avenue. They're specimen trees, which means they're protected from being cut down. And they have my favorite tree name of all. These are Metis Sequoia glyptostroboides. So great name. The city has been a Tree City USA for more than 40 years, was the first city in Virginia to become one, and it's still really important to us. One of the things, though, is that the urban forest isn't only about the canopy. The understory is also important. The city has a lot of native plantings in our parks that help with native pollinators, which are desperately important to food production and maintaining the health of our environment. We're a community wildlife habitat. I saw that Sandy is on the meeting, so I want to give her credit. She has managed to get the city to be a community wildlife habitat, and she's a great resource if you're interested in qualifying your own backyard. It's very simple. All you need is water and shelter and food. That's it. Very simple. If you don't want to do it in your own backyard, you can join the Habitat Restoration Group and participate in volunteer events in the city's parks, planting native species. And a new venture in the city that is very exciting is urban agriculture. Stacey Evers has set up a new nonprofit called Hands on Harvest that is working with homeowners to grow food for our needy populations. So there are lots of opportunities for growing things in the city. Now we get to the big one. So the trees are keeping us cool, but that isn't enough. And if we look at where the impacts are on climate from what we do, there are basically the two big areas. One is the energy that we use in our built environment. So mostly electricity, some gas. And then the other is the energy that we use in transportation, getting from one place to another. So if we talk a little bit about buildings first, I have a picture of the Flower Building here because that was the very first LEED Gold building in the city. And at the moment, actually, it's still the only LEED Gold building in the city. And it's really exciting that it's being built sustainably. It has a green roof. It's built to with sustainable construction methods. LEED really was a great drive to make construction more sustainable. However, there's one area in which it really doesn't manage tightly enough to meet our needs, and that is energy. So LEED itself does not have really tight energy efficiency requirements. And if we're going to manage our impacts on climate change, we need to manage our energy use by building our buildings tighter. This little orange and purple picture is a picture of my office Engage house taken with a thermal camera, which you can borrow from the library. And the blue spots are where it was cold. So at the joints in the walls and floor, there was a lot of cold air coming into my office, whistling around my knees, much unappreciated. But you may find that your home has the same thing. I know some people in the city who just had an energy audit of their home done and found that an extension that was added had no insulation at all. So it's certainly worth doing. If you have a 20-degree temperature difference between indoors and outdoors, you can do these pictures of your own home and see how to make it more energy efficient, or work with organizations like LEAP who can do it for you. So going from this LEED Gold building, we look at Meridian High School. It's also LEED Gold, or planning to be, but there's a big difference. The high school was designed for energy efficiency and for renewable energy use. So to make it energy efficient, one of the things you do is you want to make the whole exterior of the building really tightly sealed. And even the shape of the building impacts how much heat loss there is from it. So both the shape and the size and the orientation of the building are all used to design for optimum energy efficiency. With the high school, we also managed to get a feasibility study by Oak Ridge Laboratories through the EPA to show that we could use a geothermal heating and cooling system and save enormous amounts of external energy use by using the natural, oh, you don't think the soil is warm, but 50 degrees is warm on a frozen day and it's cool on a hot day. And by exchanging heat with the earth, we can make the school much more efficient. So think sustainable, yes. Think energy efficient is more important and where we need to be headed. Once your home is energy efficient or your school is energy efficient, then you can start thinking about sourcing renewable energy. If you happen to be facing the right way and you don't have trees shading the south side of your house, solar is a good possibility. And we have two programs in the city, a Solarize program and a solar co-op that will enable you to, that will give you support, technical support and advice to have solar panels installed on your home. The school is about to have solar installed. They're still working on the contract details. Another energy use program in the city is we're going to swap the streetlights for LEDs. You should look out for this. There'll be some pilot projects going ahead, and we need your feedback about the brightness of the lights. If they're too bright, that's why we're doing pilots, so that you have the opportunity to say, this is too bright. We're managing it, trying to keep it down, but we do want community input on that. Moving on to the transportation side, this is what we like: walking. And so we're making our neighborhoods safer to walk through the neighborhood traffic calming program. Cycling, we have Capital Bike Share. We have a new nonprofit organization that's advocating for a more bikeable city. So Bike Falls Church has become very active recently. The citizens, oh goodness, what's CACT stand for?
Citizens Advisory Committee on Transportation.
Citizens Advisory Committee on Transportation and the ESC recently did a joint webinar on bike infrastructure that you can see on our website. So walkability and bikeability, stay out of the cars altogether if you can. We do have electric vehicle charging. It's free at City Hall to incentivize people making the transition from gasoline powered vehicles to electric vehicles. But the most important transition is to walk and bike where you can. And so we come back to the policy issues. Transportation, we want transit and trails, not roads. Bike and walk, not cars. It's important to note, and something that you can talk to your state legislators about, because there are changes happening right now. Our home building codes don't meet international standards for energy efficiency, and they should. But in order to act in this area, this is such a big area and has such a big impact on everything we do. What we're currently working on, and that's my primary project right now, is a climate change mitigation energy action plan. I've been told the title's too long, so I'm working on that too. It's in progress. We've done a few drafts. The Planning Commission has seen it. The Environmental Sustainability Council contributed to its writing. The City Council has seen an early draft. Basically, if you look at the little pie chart on the right, you can see that transportation is the biggest single contributor to energy use and to greenhouse gas emissions in the city. And commercial buildings and residential buildings both contribute significant amounts. Together, more than half of our greenhouse gas emissions come from energy use in our built environment. So how do we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions? We need to reduce our energy use in transportation, which we do by transit and trails, not roads, bikes and walking, not cars, and in buildings by improving the energy efficiency of the buildings. One of the things to note is that multifamily housing, people in multifamily housing typically will use less energy per capita than people in single family homes. So the move to build some significant high density multifamily dwellings in the city is a good thing from a greenhouse gas emissions point of view. The energy use that you can't manage to reduce, people are still going to eat cooked food for the most part, for example. You need to switch to renewable energy. Some of it we might be able to source by putting solar panels on buildings in the city. The new Volvo dealership has solar panels all over its roof. Claire and Don's have had solar panels on their roof for more than a decade. I think more than about 40 homes in the city already have rooftop solar systems. But the annual community consumption of electricity in the city is about 140 million kilowatts. And the known rooftop systems, the ones that I know about, generate about 507 kilowatts. So that's a tiny amount. So one of the things that you could do, and many already 5% of the consumption in the city is done this way, people choose to buy renewable energy. You can do it directly through the utility, or you can buy renewable energy certificates, but you can support renewable energy development. And on that point, supporting it, that's where advocacy to federal and state legislators really is important, because that's what's going to push the drive to move to renewable energy, and it also supports regional and local action to make more renewable energy available. One of the things that we also need to do as we develop this energy action plan for the community, the government needs to do it too. We can't just sit back and say, oh, you all do it. Our emissions are about 2% of the whole community. So the impact that we'll have as we improve things will not be huge, but the leadership by example is really important. So the government needs an energy plan that also covers our buildings, our fleet. The challenge there is replacing the big diesel-powered dump trucks with electric. Can we get electric vehicles that will operate in the snow, for example? You know, if the community power goes down for 3 days, how do we keep these big electric trucks that we would like to have running? So that's a challenge that we need to address and keep ourselves informed about. And the city also needs to use renewable energy either by generating it or by buying it elsewhere. There's a new concept that's under discussion. Loudoun is doing a study on it called a community choice aggregation plan, where the government would buy renewable energy and then make it available to community members. Typically done on an opt-out basis, but certainly a very an interesting concept that might help us move towards renewable energy sources. We're nearly there. The important thing about all this, and the reason I'm happy to be talking to you today, is that community really counts. When I talk about the energy plan, here I am out there. This was me talking actually about chapter 5, about the whole plan for the environment. Contact me, let me know what you think. I am a public servant. I'm here to do what you want. So if you tell me what you want, I'll try and do it. Get involved in your community. Everyone from our elementary school children doing Operation Earthwatch to usually adults doing the neighborhood tree planting, to community members participating in our community meetings. It's really important to make your views known. The people who need to know them are city council members. You know, the city operates with a city council who acts sort of like a board of directors and tell the city manager what he's going to do. And he has to do it with the staff. So he tells the staff, this is what you're going to do, because that's what the city council said. Well, the city council don't make stuff up in a vacuum. What the city council tell us to do comes from the community. So it's really important that you get involved with the city's boards and commissions. Just participate in the meetings, send letters to city council. Public comments at city council have a huge impact on what we do. And if you're not sure when, take a look at the city's website. You'll see that we have there's a search bar on the website. The website's called fallschurchva.gov. There's a search bar, and if you type notify me, you'll get to a page which will allow you to subscribe to all sorts of community activities. And it's a very good way of finding out what's happening in the city. I think I should also mention the Falls Church News Press. It's not a government publication, but it certainly has great calendar of community events that you can pay attention to. And the city also has some required advertising in there. So when we're taking big decisions, they're advertised in the press, and the Falls Church News Press is where we advertise. So absolutely well worth looking. I read that every week. Moving outside the city, because outside the city has an impact on how we live. VirginiaGeneralAssembly.gov will tell you who your representatives are and how to contact them. And in case you can't remember all that, I put together a resource sheet, and that I think will be published on the League of Women Voters site and maybe also on the CBC site, to give you links to everything that I've talked about in terms of the people that you need to talk to. So I wanted to end my presentation with the thing that I think is really important: trees. With that, I've finished speaking.
Okay, well, thanks, Kate, for that excellent wide-ranging presentation of environmental policies and needed actions here in the city. In a few minutes, we'll start in with questions for Kate that we've been collecting through the chat tab on your screen. And feel free to continue to submit questions, again, using the chat tab. And while you're thinking of a question, I wanted to share a brief commentary on the subject of climate change. So we in the city share a similar situation with many communities here in the US, and I suspect around the globe. We've done some things to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions here in the city, but on the whole, our efforts have been very modest. While discouraging, it's not surprising. After all, greenhouse gas emissions are an invisible pollutant, resulting from so many of our daily behaviors, whether it's the heating and cooling of our homes and offices, or driving around to all the destinations that we have to get to. Changing the technologies that we use and similar behaviors to get to zero emissions is a big challenge. It takes long enough for our actions to affect the climate that most of us will not know those who will benefit from our actions. And for those jurisdictions who do reduce their emissions, it won't change anything unless everyone does the same thing. In our own country, one political party and broad sections of the middle of the country, indeed our own state at present, do not embrace the changes in policy needed to rapidly reduce emissions. So we're at a point where it's increasingly evident that we're not likely to reach the targets that have to be reached in order to maintain a stable climate, and that future generations will face increasingly severe challenges from extreme weather events, especially as we approach the middle of the century. So one might ask, why bother to make any effort to prevent climate change if our trajectory now seems inevitable? And I think the answer to this is pretty basic. And it involves looking at our younger generations and asking, can we really not make the changes that we know have to be made to avoid handing them a worsening climate? Let's hope that there are enough of us who want to see our emissions reduced to really make a difference. And with that, Kate, I think it's time for you to answer a few questions.
Okay.
So I'm gonna start with the first question. It was actually submitted in advance from a David McLeod. I'm particularly interested in the tree canopy issue, given in particular all the mature tree removal we see associated with land development in the city and surrounding areas. Do you know of any written material from the city about policy and practices to promote keeping mature trees on property from being developed?
Okay, well, so Mr. McLeod, Tim gave me this question in advance, so I did some heavy research on the city's website. Yes, there is policy and practices. One of the things I want to mention is that Virginia is what's called the Dillon Rule state. So the city cannot pass ordinances that are not enabled by legislation at the state level. So what we can pass in terms of tree protection is limited by what the state allows us to pass. But the city has taken full advantage of what the state allows us to do. And we do have formal written guidelines, both for trees and development on single family properties. So any single family home property that's being redeveloped, so with a grading plan, that is anything more than 2,500 square feet, the city has requirements for how trees are protected, inspected by the arborist, and how they're managed during a construction process. you can also nominate your tree to be a specimen tree, in which case it's protected. And then there are resource protection areas in the city where you can't interfere with the trees at all. On a commercial basis, the city has formal tree and landscape specifications, and all commercial properties. And I think perhaps we don't get the word out enough. On a commercial property, you cannot take a tree down without prior permission from the arborist, and the permission requires a replacement. So these things do exist. I'm happy to send you the links if you contact me at environment@fallschurchva.gov.
Okay, next question has to do with composting here in the city. How is the composting program going? How are participation rates, and what's the city's subsidy as compared to the monthly fee for participants? Regarding participation rates, do you know how ours compares to our neighboring localities?
Well, the city program was really the first sort of jurisdiction-wide program in the area. The city was very much a leader on this, with our solid waste coordinator, Chris McGow, starting both the pickup program and a compost drop-off facility at City Hall. So there are basically 3 composting programs in the city. One is the famous Sandy Tarpinian, who I mentioned earlier, does composting workshops. So if you want to do backyard composting, you can learn to do it. You can get a free enclosure for your compostable materials, and she will teach you how to do composting in your own yard. You can do a curbside compost pickup at an extremely discounted price. So typically the price is, I think it was $60 a month for a curbside pickup, but here in the city you can get a whole year's worth for $30 at the moment. So there's a big discount right now. Our participation, initially increased quite rapidly. I don't have the actual numbers available to hand, though I can get them if you send me a note. I can ask our solid waste coordinator to give you actual numbers. But the fee is much lower here in the city, and we do have good participation. If you walk down on Waste Day is Wednesday, you can see lots and lots of bins from Compost Crew set out, and they are picking up citywide. And there's even some pickup going on at businesses in the city. I know that the Target has a composting facility, for example, and Lazy Mike's is now participating in a compost program. Then the third way of composting is our drop-off facility at City Hall behind the tennis courts, which enables people living in multifamily housing to also avail themselves of compost opportunities.
Okay, yes, I think our composting program has been very successful. I often get questions from people in other jurisdictions. How do you guys in Falls Church do it? So kudos for us on that. Next question has to do with renewable energy. Are there any renewable energy investments that you would like to see installed on city property?
Yes, I think the obvious places are the property yard has a flat roof. And now the building itself may be, the whole property yard may be a redevelopment project for the city in the near future. I think it might be our next renovation project. So we do need to manage it around that. But if the city were willing to spend the cash, then I think we could just put solar on that ourselves, or we can try and do a power purchase agreement, perhaps using the same type of contract that the schools are using. The other place that came up in the capital improvements program would be to do something on the fire station. Apparently that's due for a roof replacement soon, and putting solar on that might be an option. So that's a shared building with Arlington, so it's a little more complicated in order to get permission.
Yeah, actually the fire station has what's called a raised seam metal roof. And if you look up at the roof, you can see those metal grooves all the way down. It turns out you can put solar panels on those a lot easier than you can by having to drill into roofs. So that's something that we should definitely be taking a look at. I see David McLeod was interested in your earlier response. It looks like he has submitted another question. How are developers influenced to develop in an environmentally friendly way? What regulations can the city put into place and enforce given any legislative constraints?
So the influence that we have is through our zoning policy. So the city is divided into zones, some commercial zones, some zones for transition between a commercial and residential, and then various different kinds of residential zones. Within that commercial development, there are limited, or in some places, I think even no allowances for residential development. So, but the property developers want to put residential property along our main corridors. And of course, that's something that the city wants too. But in order to get the special exception to our zoning program that residential development requires, we ask the developers to make what are called voluntary concessions. So they have to make concessions to us if we're going to make the concession of letting them do residential in a mixed-use building and perhaps give the building greater height. So by doing that, the city can negotiate with the developers what environmental elements they include in their buildings. So one of the things that we've done in the criteria specifically for those special exceptions, the primary criteria are about the city's goals for a thriving commercial area. But in the secondary criteria in the last 2 years ago, was it, we added a requirement that the developers be encouraged to build to LEED Gold and to an energy efficiency standard that's 20% better than LEED Gold requires. So that's now part of it's not a primary criterion, but it's part of the secondary criterion for special exceptions. In addition, during the boards and commissions reviews and the staff reviews, what we do is take the strategies and actions identified in the comprehensive plan. The developers are required to meet the requirements of the comprehensive plan. So we highlight the specific items within the comprehensive plan that we want from the developer. So we constantly push for tree protection, for green roofs, for green infrastructure for stormwater management, for more open space, for better stormwater management. We've been trying very hard to encourage solar, or at least being ready to put solar on the roof should the market become more favorable to do that. So far, we've certainly got a long way in terms of getting green roof commitments. And with this new secondary criterion, the two latest proposed developments are proposed to go to, and the West Falls Church development are all going for LEED Gold. And the two latest, One City Center and Founders Road 2, are talking about the 20% energy efficiency improvement too. But so far, we haven't been very successful, I think, in getting the solar or renewable energy commitment from the developers. Also, the Energy Transition Subcommittee put together a memo explaining to the developers what we see happening in the electric vehicle market, and encouraging them to put in more chargers as they build the buildings, and also more provision to add them later. If you have the conduit and the panel space already in place, it's far simpler to add electric vehicle charging later than if you don't have them ready when you build your building. So the regulations, there's the secondary exception criterion. There are the specifically tree regulations are enabled. much of the rest is not enabled specifically in legislation. Do you have anything to add, Tim?
Well, I was just going to say on the Founders Row 2, the developer has proposed to put in conduit. That's the capability to allow for future charging stations for up to half of the spaces in their parking garage. So that would be quite a breakthrough to have that occur. So I see that Sandy Tarpinian has shared with us, for those of you interested in doing composting yourself, that she's going to have a workshop this coming Sunday, April 24th, from 2 to 4 in Cherry Hill Park. And I'm promised that the weather will be much better on Sunday than it is today. So another question on relating to energy efficiency. If the city had an energy manager, what capabilities could they provide? And would it result in savings on utility costs?
I think it could. Having someone with, I'm perhaps an environmental generalist. You know, I helped work on the whole Chapter 5 and all the elements of it. And I do try very hard to keep up to date with all the developments in energy, but things are moving very fast, especially in the regulatory environment. And there are engineering aspects of energy management that I just don't know. So certainly within city government, we could save operating expenses, I think, if we had an energy expert who was serving as a consultant to both the schools and the city government about how to manage energy better in our buildings. I really think that there's scope for us to reduce our energy use. And that same person, I think, could also serve as a consultant to the community energy plan. What we're doing with that plan is trying to use a contract that the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments has with some real expertise in this area. But, you know, if you have a high level expert talking to a generalist, there's still a communications barrier. If we had an energy expert, I think we could get a really substantial energy plan for both the community and the city. And I think that would be a big benefit for all of us. I mean, the cost savings are not just for the city government, the cost savings are for community members. If somebody is out there helping you make your home more energy efficient, you'll spend less. It's great.
Yeah, I think it's becoming a more common thing for jurisdictions to have an energy manager on their staff to help with the obviously much more complicated issues that we face today than we did, let's say, 2 or 3 decades ago. The question came in on rain gardens. If I replace some of my lawn with a rain garden or a landscape of native plants instead, can I get my stormwater fee reduced?
I think Sandy's trying to highlight that you can't. But that's something that you should be advocating for. At the moment, the stormwater management plan treats lawns as just as good as rain gardens or as landscaping when they're not. I think there may be a credit for rain gardens, but certainly lawns are regarded as permeable surface. The city has just set up a new Public Utilities Commission that will be discussing how we handle stormwater management, among other things. And certainly they are people who need to know that lawns are not great for stormwater management. Plant a tree.
Okay, I think we've exhausted our time for Q&A. So Erica, I think I turn it back over to you at this point. You.
You're on mute again.
Sorry, my kid came in the middle of that, so needed to do that. But anyway, we are a little over time, but that was a fantastic overview. I've learned so much. I think all of us have, and excited to get more involved myself. I hope everyone is. Certainly, we all need to be planting more trees. And thank you so much for that comprehensive overview. Thanks to CVC for coordinating with us. And I guess that I would just end, if there's any follow-up, our follow-up questions, please do reach out to me or to Hal and to Kate, I guess. And you had said there's, we can include this if there's a recording, Allison, is it environment@fallschurchva.gov? Is that the best place for questions?
Yeah, environment@fallschurchva.gov.
Yep.
Okay.
And just want to call everyone's attention, Jeff Peterson pointed out that while the city may not give you a credit on your stormwater fee, the VPIS Rain Smart program does offer grants to help you install rain gardens. So if you have a wet spot on your property, you can get some help managing it.
That's great. Thank you so much. It's very informative. I really appreciate that we could do this together. And Kate, that was just so informative for all of us. Thank you.
It was a great pleasure to do it. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. And thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you all.